I didn't fly to my father's funeral because I wanted to. It was because, as luck would have it, my conscience didn't die with him. They say time heals. That's a lie. Time only teaches you to keep your face when everything inside of you wants to spit. I kept that face. For too long. And now I'm standing at the gates of the memorial complex where he's about to be buried. As if he were a saint and not the same man who once cut me out of his life as easily as a pen out of paper. The weather as ordered was gray. No rain, no sunshine. It was as if the sky itself had decided, well, you're on your own. There's a guard at the gate. A man in a uniform of about 20-something years old, looking like a proper boy according to the statute. In his hands a tablet. He doesn't even look at me when he asks, "Your last name?" I take a step forward, clear as a drill. Harding. Meredith Harding. He flips through the list. And then he says something that gives me an electric shock. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list." That's it. Not a pause, not a hint of sympathy. Just the fact. "There's been a mistake," I say. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Harding's daughter." He looks at me like he's heard that 20 times in one day. Orders from the family. Only persons approved by the widow. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Sounds like an automatic retraction. You know what's funny? I didn't come for speeches and I didn't come for forgiveness. I came because I believe that even traitors have a moment when someone has to tell the truth. I wanted to tell it. But now I'm standing outside the fence like an uninvited guest. Others pass by. All in black, all with faces like they're grieving. No one recognizes me. And it's no wonder. They didn't even want to. My stepmother, Julianne, with her trademark glossy magazine smile, is already sitting in the front row. Her back is straight, her hair is styled, even the tear on her cheek is bespoke. She always knew how to look the right way, even if it required wiping me out of the picture like dust off a mirror. I turn around and walk to my car. No, I don't drive away. Just needing to catch my breath. Find my center of gravity. I have a uniform in the trunk. Generals. Because unlike them, I'm not just a daughter. I'm an officer. And I know exactly what honor is. But apparently, honor doesn't count when you're not on the list. I pull out my cell phone. I punch in a quick message. "I'm here. I wasn't allowed in." I send it to an old acquaintance. Commander R. Kelly. The same man who once, in the smoking room, said to me, "You'll endure more than your father." At the time I thought it was a joke. Today I realize it was a warning. A moment later he replies, "If you're here, you're on the list. I'll meet you out front. And you know what? I'm going to be on that list. Even if I have to stand like a nail in the eye of everyone who thinks family is just pictures on the wall and empty speeches at funerals to do it." I pull out my uniform. I polish my epaulets. I pin up my hair. And I look at myself in the mirror. I may not be on the list. But I'm a general. And generals don't ask permission to tell the truth. And if they don't like me coming in, well, that's their problem. I started the engine, but I didn't move. They say the road is the best way to think things through. But where can I go when every street in this town smells like his voice? Everywhere I turned, there were signs of him disappearing from my life slowly and beautifully. First he called less often. Then he stopped altogether. Then the excuses started. "Busy. I'm away. I'll call you later." He only called once, when he got a medal and he wanted me to watch the broadcast. He didn't ask me to go. He just, wanted me to watch. On TV. Like I wasn't a daughter, but a spectator. 20 minutes later, I was at his house. The gate was open. The lawn was like a picture. The house was freshly painted. And not a single crack. As if someone had scraped away the old layers of life to build a new one, sterile, smooth, without flaws. Without me. Julianne opened the door. Not a shadow of surprise. It was as if she knew I was coming. The only question was when. And I couldn't say she was happy about it. "You came," she said, as if it were news she'd accepted but hadn't ordered. Yes. Imagine that. I'm not just a shadow from the past. She opened the door wider but didn't back away. As if entry was something to be earned. "I came to say goodbye. Not to you. To him. Then keep it quick. There are a lot of people here who were really there for him in his last years." I laughed. Dryly. Without mirth. "Ah yes, those who came later, but louder. Don't worry. I'm not going to make a scene." She backed off. And I went in. The house was different inside. The furniture was new. The kitchen was like a commercial. Even the smell was different. The only thing that hadn't changed was the fireplace. The same one where he used to tell me war stories. Now it was where his medals stood, neatly arranged, without a single picture of me. I came closer, took one of the medals in my hands. I remembered how he'd given me a candy bar after my first day. Back then, he could still smile without bitterness. Now it's just metal and wood. No warmth. He thought to the end that you weren't coming, Julian said behind me. Too proud. No, I turned around. He just knew that one day I'd have nothing left to lose. She didn't say anything. I was silent. But there was more meaning in that silence than any of her speeches on the podium. I walked out without saying goodbye, because we'd done that a long time ago. No words. No hard feelings. Just each chose and went our separate ways. At the hotel, I laid out my uniform on the bed. The polished epaulettes. Order. Gloves. Everything he'd want to see on him. But tomorrow it'll be on me. Because if anyone's gonna speak for him, it's gonna be me. His daughter. General. And witness that behind the medals there is often fear. And behind loud speeches, silence. And if tomorrow someone thinks I don't deserve to be there, let them try and say it out loud. Let them try and look me in the eye. That night I couldn't sleep. The TV was silent, the phone was silent. Only thoughts rumbled in my head like artillery. I remembered the day of my graduation from the academy. The solemn hall, the glitter of epaulettes, speeches about honor and duty. My mother sat in the fourth row and clapped while the other cadets hugged their fathers. And I stared at the empty chair. He hadn't come. No letter, no call. Only later did I find out. He had a banquet that day at the Veterans Club. It was too important to come to his daughter's house. And now I'm standing on the border between the past and the present. Tomorrow he'll be seen off with honors. Tomorrow he gets all the words he doesn't deserve. And me? I get to finally say out loud what I've been carrying around for years. At some point I stood up, went to the mirror. In the reflection is a woman. Not a child, not a cadet. A woman they tried to erase from my memory, but forgot that memory is a stubborn thing. I ran my fingers over the epaulettes. I remembered how many times I'd been told, "You're too tough, too loud, too..." But it was that too much that got me to where I am. I pulled an envelope out of my suitcase. An old letter. Written to him years ago but never sent. I read it to myself in a whisper, as if I was afraid someone would overhear. Papa, I didn't expect you to be perfect. I just wanted you to be, albeit with mistakes, even with pain. But you were. And you chose to disappear. I put the letter in the breast pocket of my uniform. Not for him. For myself. Because tomorrow when I walk up to the casket I won't speak. I'll just put that letter down. And walk away. And let this be his last reward, the truth. I turned out the light but I didn't lie down. I just sat on the edge of the bed in total darkness, as if the darkness could protect me from the memories. You know, there's that feeling when you're not angry anymore, no more resentment, no more waiting. You're just tired. Tired of trying to prove something. Tired of being comfortable. Tired of holding your face when the world is crushing you from the inside out. But in that tiredness I've found a solution. I'm coming. Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve to be heard. Even if no one is listening. And in the morning I will get up, put on my uniform, adjust my epaulettes and go. Because I'm not an empty space in someone's biography. I'm not the daughter who wasn't mentioned. I'm a voice that's been silenced for too long. And I will not be silent again tomorrow. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. I arrived at the memorial before anyone else. So early that even the guards were still finishing their morning coffee, hiding their yawns behind the strictness of their uniforms. I was wearing a general's uniform, sitting as if the fabric itself understood that today it was to be a demonstration, not just a ceremony. Not for the public. For me. For memory. For those who tried to wipe my name off the wall but forgot that some names are scratched out with fingernails. Commander Kelly stood as if he hadn't moved since the last century. His back straight, his eyes squinted, his gaze as if looking through. He looked at me and simply said, "Good morning, General." No hug. No extra words. Just an acknowledgement. And I nodded. Because sometimes just a good morning is enough to remind you of who you are. Even if the whole world has decided to forget. The officer at the entrance, the one with the clipboard, looked up. His face froze for a second. Did he recognize it? Maybe. Realize you're in trouble? Absolutely. He squared his shoulders and stepped aside. I walked past him without saying a word. Because you don't always have to speak. Sometimes it's enough to be. Chairs were already being set up, the sound checked, the podium prepared. In the front row, name tags. Julianne Harding, Colonel Rose, Captain Ellis. My name wasn't there, of course. But I wasn't looking. I took a seat a little to the side. Not in the shadows, but not in the center. Let them see. Let them guess. Let them whisper. The main thing is that I'm here. When the band started playing, the show began. Everything was perfect. Flags in the wind, speeches made of papers, faces cut out of Life of the Military magazine. But it all seemed like theater. Because this theater lacked the main stage. The truth. And then I stood up. Not by invitation. Not because of a script. Just because it was time. I walked to the podium. Every step was like a punch. Every look like a gunshot. But I walked. I wasn't on the list. But I'm here. Because I'm a daughter. And I'm a general. And that's when the silence began. The kind of silence that sounds louder than applause. I looked around the crowd. Some were staring at the floor. Some were looking past me. Julianne was frozen, like she didn't know if she could breathe at all. There was no grief or anger on her face, just a cold no place, no time. And I thought, this is what fear of the truth looks like. No screaming. No drama. Just the fear of being exposed without a single outcry. My father was a loud man. But even louder was what he kept quiet about. About his daughter. About decisions. About how convenient it was not to look at the past if it interfered with the picture of the future. I spoke calmly. I didn't have to be tense. Not to sympathize. But because someone had to call things out. And if not me, then who? I was crossed off the list. First from the invitation. Then my bio. But you know what the problem is? The list doesn't change the facts. I am, and will continue to be a part of this story. Whether you want me to be or not. I didn't look at Julianne. Not because I was afraid. It was because I didn't want to give her any extra shots. This wasn't a scene for her. This was goodbye mine. I paused. I made sure no one moved. Then I added, today you're honoring an officer. But you're burying a man. And no matter how hard you try to embellish the story, the truth still breathes. And it speaks in my voice. I walked away from the microphone without fanfare. I just went back to my seat. Sat down. I lifted my chin. And became invisible again. On my own terms. After I spoke, the host hesitated. Then he let it out. Thank you for the personal recollection. And switched to the next name. The theater continued. But the stage was on fire. And I sat there thinking. Even if no one clapped, I had said out loud what they had been hiding from for years. And in that silence, which no one interrupted, there was more meaning than in all the speeches put together. When the official part was over, people were streaming out. Some walked past me, pretending not to notice. Some looked at me with that expression you get when you don't know whether to sympathize or fear. I stayed. I walked over to the coffin. It was under an awning, covered with a flag. Neat like the military always does. It was by the book. Everything was right. Except inside was a man who didn't know how to be a father. He knew how to command, how to punish, how to give orders, but not how to just hold his hand and say, I'm proud of you. I took out the letter. That letter. Folded 4 times, crumpled with time and pain. I put it on the coffin. No words. No goodbyes. He'd already chosen silence then. I just left him to it now. An elderly man in a dress uniform approached me. His face was as wrinkled as a campaign map. I served with him back in Panama, he said. He was tough, but fair. I nodded. Did he talk about me? The man hesitated. Once. He said he had a daughter who was going her own way, and that maybe she was right, even if he doesn't understand her. For the first time all day, I felt something inside me shake. Not pain, not joy, but the strangest thing, recognition. Even if it was through a third mouth. Even if it was years later. I pulled myself into a stance and saluted. Not the coffin. I saluted myself, because I, too, had been through the campaign. Not with a rifle but with a heart. The man repeated my gesture. Then he left in silence. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like a stranger. Just real. I got into the car but I didn't leave right away. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as if it could give me an answer. Outside someone was slamming doors, talking, taking pictures. I couldn't hear. Only my own words echoed in my head. They echoed in every bone in my body. Not because they were loud. It was because they were mine. In the side mirror I saw a woman with a notebook. A journalist. Or more likely a uniform hunter. She came closer, tapped on the window. I rolled down the window. General Harding? I nodded. You weren't on the list but you went anyway. May I ask why? I gave her a look that made her regret asking. Because I'm not someone's signature at the bottom of an invitation. I'm part of this story. You want to write about it? Write about it. But let the truth be in the first paragraph. Not in the notes. She wrote it down. And then she said something I didn't expect. It was powerful. A lot of people were dumbfounded. Dumbfounded? I chuckled. Well, then everything's going according to plan. She's gone. And I stayed. Not pride. Not resentment. It's clarity. I didn't just come to a funeral. I had come to reclaim my name. There were gloves on the seat next to me. The same ones I'd been through so much with. I put them on. And suddenly I realized it was just beginning. As I got out of the car, I noticed some of the military men looking at me. Some nodded. Some looked away. But no one else was ignoring. I had become part of the scene, whether they wanted me to or not. And Julianne? She was standing by the exit, talking to one of the officers. When she saw me, her eyes went glassy. I walked past her. Slowly. Slowly. And for the first time without lowering my eyes. And that's when Commander Kelly, who had been keeping a low profile all this time, stepped forward. Loudly. Loudly. Without pathos. Welcome, General. Silence fell on the pad like a heavy flag. And no one objected. I walked slowly to the car. My legs were buzzing from the exertion, but in my head silence. Not the kind of silence that presses, but the kind where you can hear everything. The past, the future, and your own decisions. I knew that tomorrow this would be talked about. Maybe even condemn it. Maybe someone would write a post, someone would whisper behind my back. But I also knew. I wasn't here for them. I was here for me. For the girl who once stood in an empty row at graduation. For the woman who waited too long for someone to call her by name. For the general who learned to be heard, even if he wasn't listened to. I closed the car door, started the engine, and turned on the radio. The first song that came on was an old blues. The same one he used to put on Sundays. And I didn't turn it off. I just drove. Going. No GPS. No plan. No need to explain anything. Because everything that needed to be said had already been said. And it's been said by me. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see the hero put everyone in their place. When I returned to the same city the next day, it was as if nothing had happened. The streets were the same, familiarly narrow, as if they were pressing down on my shoulders. People walked down the sidewalks with that expression that gives away those who have seen everything but prefer to look the other way. And it suited them. Silence suited them perfectly. But not for me. I didn't come back to change anyone's mind. Or to apologize. I came back to finish. In my own way. On my terms. And if it makes anyone uncomfortable, so much the worse for them. First on my list was the notary. An old lady with eyes that saw too much. She was the one who handled the will. I knew there wasn't a word about me in it. And yet I came. Because sometimes silence needs to be called by name. I want to read the full text, I said, sitting down across from her. She wasn't surprised. She just nodded and held out the folder. I read slowly. Like a surgeon before an operation, every paragraph, every word. Everything was clearly laid out. The widow's estate, the veterans' donations, even the old record collection was up for auction. My name was not there. Not anywhere. I closed the file. Folded my hands. Looked her in the eye. Thank you. Now I know for sure. She was silent for a moment, and then she said quietly, He left a letter. Not official. Personal. For you. But he asked me to give it to you only if you came yourself. A letter. He did leave something behind. Or did he want to clear his conscience? Or was he just playing by his own rules to the end? I took the envelope. It was old, thick. Yellowed around the edges. My name was written on it. In full. No abbreviations. And in that moment, just that moment, I wished I wasn't strong. But I was. I opened the envelope right there. And I started reading. There was no apology in the letter. Not one direct. I was wrong. He wrote about fear. About how over the years it had become easier for him to give orders than to tell his daughter he missed her. About how he'd been taught to be silent when it hurt. And how he passed that silence on to me. I didn't know how to talk to you when you became an adult. I was afraid to be weak around someone I myself had raised to be strong. I'm sorry if I couldn't be an anchor for you. You became a general. And I remained a soldier who hadn't figured out how to be a father. I read to the end. The paper trembled in my fingers, but not from tears, from anger. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He just described his pain, that's all. As if that was enough to close the account. But I knew. Forgiveness isn't a bargain. You either have it or you don't. And I had it. Not for him. For me. Next stop was my mother's house. She'd long ago moved to the southern neighborhood. To a modest one-story house with a peeling fence and a bell that never worked. I knocked with my fist. She opened quickly. As if she'd been waiting. I saw the broadcast, she said, not moving away. You were real. I was me. He never talked about any of this, you know. I found out like everyone else from letters, from rumors. But he always kept a picture in his drawer. Of your graduation. Even after everything. I didn't say anything. Because it didn't make any difference. Are you coming in? I nodded. Everything inside was familiar. Even the smell of old cinnamon from her candles. Time seemed to stand still here. We drank tea in silence. But there was more reconciliation in that silence than in all his letters. Afterwards, I went out for a walk. Neighbors recognized me, said hello. Some with pride, some with surprise. The Harding woman? The general? I just nodded. Not out of pride, but because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I felt like the town was not seeing me for the first time as a ghost in uniform, but as a person. As someone who came, said, and stayed. I approached the old monument where he had once taught me to read inscriptions. Now my inscription could be there. Not on the stone, but in their memory. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years I felt not a weight but a support. Because the truth is not a weapon. It's an anchor. And I'm holding it. I went back to the cemetery in the evening. There were no more people. Just the wind and the fallen leaves. The grave was fresh, the earth still breathing. I stood silent. No uniform. No loud words. Suddenly I heard footsteps. I turned around and there was Julianne. A widow in mourning. But no armor today. No makeup, no style. Just a tired look on her face and a heavy weight in her eyes. I knew you'd come back, she said quietly. I didn't do it for him. It was for me. I understand, her voice trembled. He was afraid he didn't deserve you. And maybe that's why he gave everything so easily to others. So he wouldn't have to keep it. Not to remember. And you? I was with him. Not because he was perfect. It was because I was running away from myself too. And when you came I was scared. Because you reminded me of what he could have been if he'd made up his mind. I nodded. And it was more than forgiveness. We stood side by side, not as enemies. Like two women tired of carrying someone else's mistakes. Then she walked away. And I stayed. And I put down the second letter. The one I'd written last night. It wasn't a reproach. There was only one sentence. I don't expect you to understand. I just won't let you keep quiet anymore. As I drove out of town, the sun rose slowly. It was like it was breathing with me. I turned on my walkie-talkie to say goodbye. Transmitted a frequency I hadn't used in years. General Harding here. Signals clear. Mission accomplished. I'm on my way back. And somewhere in return a short click. Confirmation. From the world. From the past. From myself. It wasn't victory. It was a restoration. Not a name. A voice. And with that I left. Not as a winner. But as a woman who could never be erased. A week later I came back again. Not in uniform, not on duty, but as an ordinary woman. In the attic of my mother's old house, I looked for an old box of books. And I found another. Dusty. Cardboard. Labeled personal. There was a compass. Shabby with faded letters. He gave it to me once before my first camp. If you get lost, always know where north is. North is home. I didn't understand it at the time. And then it became the very thing I was getting lost from. I put the compass in the palm of my hand. It was still working. The hand was shaking, but it was pointing in the right direction. And suddenly, I had a clear realization. I was no longer lost. I took the compass with me, not as a memory of him, as a reminder of myself, that every woman has her own north, and her voice is her path. I stood in front of the mirror. Not the general, not a daughter, not a lost girl. It's me. In every scar, in every look, in every pause. And I knew I couldn't be crossed off now, because I'm not on the list. I'm in the voice. That was my story. You can forget the name, but you won't forget what the truth sounds like when it's said out loud. If you've made it to this point, it means something inside of you has been crossed off too. It's time to give it back. And let them hear it. Not everyone. It's enough to hear yourself. I ran into a young guy in a uniform in the parking lot, fresh out of the academy. He had something in his eyes that my father didn't, genuine interest. Excuse me. Are you General Harding? I smiled. Not anymore. Just Harding. I heard you spoke. It was, powerful. He hesitated. Then he pulled a shabby notebook out of his pocket. Can I ask you something? How do you not get lost in this system? I looked at him. For a long time. Then I put an old compass in his hand. Find your north. And don't let anyone tell you it doesn't exist. He nodded as if he'd received a medal. And then I realized this conversation was more important than all the ceremonies. Because the truth isn't always for those around you. Sometimes it's for those who follow. I got in the car. I smiled. And drove away. No flag. No escort. No plan. But with her. The finale is here. But it's up to you to decide what to do with the truth. Hide it or tell it. It'll still come out. Even if you have to go it alone.